This is the Weather Lounge here at WeatherWorks.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to the Weather Lounge. I'm your host, meteorologist Brad Miller, and our podcast comes to you from our WeatherWorks headquarters here in Hackettstown, New Jersey. And joining me, as always, is my good buddy and co-host, meteorologist Mike Mahalik. Hey there, Mike.
Hey, Brad. Good to be here once again. And hey, we're in the heart of winter now.
Yeah, I think it's a good time, though. We can talk about some winter weather records now that
Yeah.
we're, still right here in the middle of winter, basically.
No, I think that's a really good topic to talk about because, I mean, even as a kid, I used to look up, oh, what was the coldest ever
Mm-hmm.
on Earth and what was the coldest ever in the United States? How about Pennsylvania? Like that sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
who
So,
got the most snow out of a certain storm and things
well,
like
you
that.
always want to see what is the
Yeah,
most extreme, it sounds
absolutely.
like. When we're talking about records, and it's always good to know what that is. And it's good if you're ever playing Trivia Pursuit or on Jeopardy or something, you have that random knowledge in your head if you really need.
And we've lived through a few of those records. It's always nice to say, yeah, I
Yeah,
remember that. Yeah,
right, absolutely. I don't know if that's good or bad.
I
Does that just
know.
make me feel old or what? But I think we are going to need some help with this because there's so many records to cover. So hey, why don't we invite in meteorologist Mike Priante once again to the Weather Lounge?
Well, you guys always need my help because
Yes.
otherwise, I mean, Brad, if unless you want to record these and produce them,
I
hey,
Yes.
know. We take Mike for granted. Yeah, we take it for granted. We know what you do behind the scenes. I mean, we do the fun stuff. You have to do all the editing, and so we gotta invite you in here once in a while.
Hey, without Mike Priante there, we'd be in a lot of trouble with all
No,
the
I
editing and
agree.
stuff that has to get done. So, Mike, we do appreciate all you do for the Weather Lounge, and maybe we should buy him a gift card or something like that.
Yeah,
a
well,
gift card. No, no, I don't need a gift card. Trust me, this is part of my job.
All right,
So
we'll just give him a slap on the back. Good
yeah.
job,
yeah,
buddy.
there you go.
Well, you guys got a nice gift for Penn State when you guys won the Rose Bowl. I mean, that's
Oh
I
yeah,
can't say
I
that.
mean,
I went
hey,
to
That
I'm
is,
Milledgeville.
I'm not complaining at all. I'm really excited for this for that. Not related to weather at all,
No,
but
I
hey,
know,
I'm
but
excited about it. I'm excited for the year, new year, 2023. So let's dive into some of these winter records, shall we?
let's start out with the most obvious. You know, it's winter. We forecast snow, so why not we just start with the most snow ever recorded? And of course, we can go off on all different tangents with this. So, who wants to start?
yeah, I could start it off for us, Brad. The funny thing about is when you think about the most
I know you can
snow.
go in so many different directions with this.
Right. I mean, it could be, well, the most snow in an hour, the most snow in 24 hours, the most snow in a week, most snow in a season. What do you want to really look at here? I mean, if you think about the most snow in an hour, I mean, a lot of times, if we get these big lake effect events, you might be talking about 5 inches, 6 inches an hour, something like that. Is something that
And we
we
just saw that
consider to
twice
be.
this season already.
Right, right. The Buffalo events have been
Both of
just
them, yeah.
off the charts ridiculous as far as how much snow is falling out of those lake effect storms, that's for sure. But I think the place to start first would be probably a 24-hour period. So the most amount of snow, we'll stick to the US for the most part here. The most amount of snow in the US for 24 hours has been 6.3 feet. Feet in 24 hours. Now, I mean, if you break that down, I mean, that's a little over 75 inches or so. We're talking about 3 inches an hour on average for 24
Right,
hours.
and that's a constant 3 inches per hour. I mean, I'm sure there were some lulls and some, they might have averaged 3 to 5 inches for a couple of hours,
Oh,
and
yeah,
maybe 1 to 2
absolutely.
inches for others. So I mean, that's crazy, man.
Yeah, that's just assuming that, it
Right,
snowed the same rate the entire day. But I'm sure there was some 6 inch an hour or
sure.
higher periods in there, and then maybe it dropped to 1 inch an hour.
And where was that at?
Yeah, so this record for the 24-hour snowfall occurred in the mountains of Colorado, but it was almost beat by a lake effect event in Montague, New York, where 77 inches was reported in 1997 in 24 hours. Now, the thing with records is that they don't just say, "Oh, this guy measured 77 inches. That's the new record." That's not how it works. So if there is a record, like an all-time record that we have to investigate, typically, you look at, hey, were all the proper measuring guidelines followed? A lot of times the World Meteorological Organization gets involved in some of these, the WMO. But what was found with the Montague, New York, is that there was some improper measuring going on during that event. So they
No,
could
that I
not.
mean it did it back then too.
Yeah. So I don't know. It could have been the guy cleared the board too often, or was measuring, in the wrong spot where it might have drifted. I mean,
They
I
didn't
don't
flip the
know.
ruler upside down, did they?
Yeah. 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 So I don't know.
The yardstick.
Are we sure they didn't measure in centimeters?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know where what went wrong, that they consider it improper guidelines, but there's a number of ways snowfall measuring can go wrong, and we know that from certified snowfall totals
Hmm.
and looking at observer reports. There's always somebody who comes out with a higher number that doesn't make any sense compared to everything else, and we have to go back and we have to
We
look at
see that
that.
on Facebook all the time. Oh, I got 6.3 inches. No, I just got 9.2.
Yeah. It always seems like there's a contest going on
I
at
know.
times, especially in the really big blizzards where somebody gets 20 and like, oh, I have more than 20, and somebody searches around and finds 21. And
You also have to think about it too, because in a blizzard, you have tons of blowing and drifting.
Yeah, it's tough to
And
measure to begin with.
it's so tough to measure, Brad. And it's like when you are trying to measure, first of all, that's why with these big events, especially lake effect events, it's so difficult to even like get an accurate reading, especially if you're not doing the proper clearing of the snowboard and remeasuring. You need a really big ruler. I mean, hey, 70 inches of snow. I don't think they make rulers that big.
yeah, well, I would imagine you wouldn't have 70 inches of snow in one measurement unless you're doing a ground depth.
Yeah, well, ground depth, just eyeball it at that point. You can, good luck with that. But I mean, it's tough with measurements, especially in blizzards, because you get people that measure, we call slant sticking, where essentially they just throw the ruler in, and it's like a little bit of a hill in the snowbank, so they measure the top of it, and it's not accurate because the snow is pushed to the side. So what you're measuring is essentially the side of the ruler. It's at an awkward angle. It's not proper. It's not level.
Yeah, absolutely. And to clarify, I said the mountains of Colorado earlier. That was in Silver Lake, Colorado. So just so you have the
Yeah, I think
actual
it's at like
town.
10,000 feet though too, but still,
Yeah, it's up there.
it is
That's for
it
sure.
is still on Earth and in the U.S. So
Has anybody been to Colorado?
I have not actually. My aunt lives in Colorado though. She lives west of Denver, a few miles into the foothills. But I have never gone out there. I always want
Once,
to
a
though.
long time ago. Never gone skiing, but I was out there once. Yeah, one thing too is, not to get off a tangent here, but the Colorado, a lot of places, especially Denver, it's like 6,000 feet above sea level. So it's tough when you go out there because you have to acclimate to just the difference in pressure. Your body needs to acclimate, and it's tough sometimes. You can't just get to Denver for the first time ever and just go for a marathon. You gotta really acclimate to just because again, it's well above sea level, especially if you're coming from like a place like Miami. It's not going to be a good time to acclimate.
No. Yeah, that's for sure. Um, so if we want to move on from the 24-hour record and we want to go to a 2-day record, let's say. So this record is from Thompson Pass in Alaska. And you kind of figure, well, this must be somewhere in Alaska or something, some of these records. But this is kind of just east of Valdez or Valdez. however you say that, where they had that oil
Yeah, the
spill
oil
back in
thing. Yeah.
I don't know, it was in the 80s or whenever that was. Yeah, Valdez, sorry. Um, so the 2-day total was 120.6 inches. That's just over 10 feet. This was back in December of 1955. And the 3-day total, because there was still this system going through, was 147 inches. Now, if you run that back, I mean, 120 inches in 2 days, I mean, that's probably close to the average Buffalo sees for the entire winter season. It's probably over the Buffalo average, honestly.
Can you imagine
Um,
shoveling that?
You
I
can't.
don't, I don't know how. Um,
You'd have to get, I mean, a bulldozer, I guess. At this point, I mean, there's no way to. Number one, you can't shovel that by yourself. And I mean, hey, think about that too. A lot that all that's gonna be on a roof or a car. I mean, think of the weight of the snow. I mean,
right,
that's
that's big concerns come in then. Absolutely. When you have that much snow going on, I mean, those roofs are taking on so much weight. You're going to have collapses, you're going to have failures. Um, Definitely something you have to think about. And Buffalo, New York's average is 95 inches around there. So, yeah, over Buffalo's seasonal average in 2 days, and that's pretty amazing. So, people out there might be thinking, "Well, Mike, what do you? This is Alaska. I mean, what about the lower 48? Let's get back to home. I mean, Alaska's Alaska. It snows all the time. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, but gotta give some love up there, But in the lower 48, Mount Shasta in California was 103 inches in 2 days,
Jeez,
and
that's like
100 and 135 inches in 3 days, and this is back in February of 1959.
that's like 5 years worth for a lot of places along the I-95 corridor.
oh my god.
Right,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. I think even in that big year in New England when they had over 100 inches of snow, I mean, 135 in 3 days, that's more than what they got
In the
that
entire
season.
year. Yeah.
Right. So
You're getting this in 72 hours.
yeah, I mean, some of these are so amazing. And speaking of Mount, I keep getting that. I keep like
Mount
goofing that up.
Shasta.
Mount Shasta. I keep wanting to say Sasta. Um, Mount Shasta. Speaking of that area, they actually hold the record for the most snow in a single storm. So they consider this one whole storm. It was over 15 feet at Mount Shasta, 189 inches. That happened over 7 days from February 13th to the 19th in 1959. So it's probably, we've been hearing a lot about this over the winter season, these atmospheric rivers people are talking about. Um, and basically what that is just a big, you know, river of moisture that's coming out of the Pacific. It's crashing into the western United States, gets lifted up over the Sierra Nevada mountains,
And then just
um,
dumps.
yeah, and just dumps so much snow throughout these mountains. So yeah, 7 day period, 189 inches, not too shabby, right?
And we also have to talk about the highest amount of snow in an hour, because I mean, hey, we have a day, we have 24 hours, we have a week, but do you know the most amount of snow, at least from our records, in an hour?
Ooh, I'm gonna guess 8.
No, but you're close.
Okay.
You're
Yeah, it's
close.
got to be somewhere like 7, 8, 9 inches in
The
an
most
hour.
I've ever really seen, as far as through my meteorological career, was 6,
That was
and
that
that
one
was
foot.
in
Yeah.
the 2013 blizzard that hit in New England. There was a 6 inch an hour report out of Northeast Connecticut.
Well, I'll tell you this: it didn't come from a coastal system. It didn't come from your typical inland runner. It came from a lake effect event, which isn't really that surprising, right?
No, that
Right.
doesn't
Um,
That
surprise
band will
me.
set
Yeah.
up over you.
right. It was back in 1966. Apparently, there was a record of, get this, 12 inches in an hour in
No.
Copenhagen, New York.
Are you
Yeah,
serious?
yeah, yeah.
12?
Now, I don't know if this is a
What are the big
super official, but it was reported. I know that back in 2017, actually, you mentioned Thompson Pass, they had about 10 inches in an hour. So that's, again, that seems more likely, and again, that is a little more, it's
That
recent,
that averages out to 1 inch every 5 minutes.
which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I know you'd have to be out there. You probably could set up a time lapse and just like for an hour, and you could see how fast the snow. It'd be ridiculous.
Imagine what the visibility is during that hour.
Well, no,
Jeez.
I can't even I'm trying to picture it because the most I've seen personally was 4 inches an hour.
I was gonna say you had
And
that one storm in down Lehigh Valley.
yeah, that was in 2016, I believe. And I feel like how could it snow any harder than this? I mean, the flakes were huge. It was just entirely ripping. And I was thinking to myself, I know it snows harder than this, but I couldn't quite wrap my head around it because it was unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around 12 inches in an hour. What's the math on that, Brad? 12 inches in an hour. That's what?
We
Oh,
said an
that's what I
inch
was
in
saying.
five
About
minutes
an
or
inch,
something.
inch every
Inch
five
in every
minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah. I mean, oof, can you? I mean, I mean, I think the I'm just I'm just so blown away by this stat. I mean, for me, I think the highest was like 4 inches an hour, 5 inches an hour from the Boxing Day blizzard of
Boxing Day, I was gonna
2011.
say. Yeah.
And when you think about it, though, liquid equivalents, that's not that much, though. Like in the thunderstorm, that would, I mean, if ratios are 10 to 1, you're probably looking at what 1.2 inches of rain in an hour, which that's a typical thunderstorm, a good, decent thunderstorm. I mean, but then if you translate it to snow, yeah, that's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, I don't know exactly what the ratio was with this, but I don't think it's 10 to 1.
Probably not.
No, no, it's probably uber fluff.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
uber fluff. I like that.
You can get a snowblower, probably blow everything away.
Yeah, blow a
Yeah,
foot of snow.
a leaf
That was
blower probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
so. Let's go on to like a bigger time scale here, and usually what and usually what the I guess all the records and all the snow calendars they don't go January 1st to December 31st, right? They go from July 1st to June 30th because that'll encompass anything that falls in the early fall and even into the late spring. And the most amount of snow that we've or at least that has been recorded or officially recorded is Mount Baker ski area in Washington, and they had 1,140 inches of snow for that 1 year period from July 1st to June 30th. So it's about 95 feet.
I mean, I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, you get a 3 foot blizzard on the East Coast, and you look outside and you're like, wow, this is the
In awe,
most
yeah.
snow ever,
Yeah, yeah.
But I don't even know what you do with
95
that
feet of snow, yeah.
95. I mean, what are you talking about
It's
here?
at the ski area too, so I mean, it's people are there. I mean, granted, they're probably not there some days because they get actually too much snow to open the ski area, and they gotta clear it out. But
Yeah.
that's pretty. I'm sure I'm sure they skied year round that year.
Oh my God. Absolutely. They're skiing on July 4th.
Yeah, even if I've seen that. Yeah, there's a couple places out in the Rockies that can survive the July 4th. Yeah, I mean, it only shut down for like 2 months, but
Um.
unheard of here in the East Coast. Sometimes we try to get 3 months out of a season now.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't. I think the ski areas around the Poconos have probably been making their own snow the entire year for the most part. But that is amazing, and it's all coming out of the West Coast here.
Yeah, again, the
With
atmospheric river
all
sets
these
up, and you get the big snow.
records. I mean, if you go back to most snow in a month, now we're heading down to California at Tamarack. This is Bear Valley ski area, 390 inches in a month in January 1911. That's 32 and a half feet. So the record depth. So this, when we talk about depth, we're talking about the physical amount of snow on the ground at one time, the most amount of snow that is actually sitting on the ground. Because you can get like, the 1,000 inches over the year, but what is the actual depth that's on the ground at any one point? Because you have some melting cycles and settling and that sort of thing. So the record amount of depth on the ground at any one point was 451 inches. Again in Tamarack, California.
Was that the same year as the?
Yes, same
Yeah,
year
okay.
as the monthly record. This is 37 and a half feet. And this was in March 1911. So it was a little bit, after that record that was set in January, a
I
few
mean,
months
that's
after.
above a 2-story house if you got that much snow on the ground at once.
Yeah, if you think about it that way, sure, because like each level of a house is about 10 feet. And then you go up, so that's 2 stories. And then if you go to the roof, so basically my house would be buried.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just like thinking about that. And first of all, I don't know how you measure it. I guess you just get a big pole of some sort and just keep, maybe you planted it in the ground at the beginning of the season or something like that, and there's marks on it. I don't know what you do.
I'm sure you could also try to measure, like, maybe if there's a nearby tree,
Yeah,
and maybe measure how tall the tree is and use that as a focal point for how high the snow is.
All right, well, let's do one more snow factoid before we move on to some other stuff, and I'll cover this one since I looked it up and I was doing a little research on it. And the big question a lot of folks always have, and you probably know the answer. I mean, has it ever snowed in Florida? And
No, never.
well, no, the obvious answer is yes, because you got to think about the Panhandle too. I mean, yeah, it's still along the Gulf Coast. I mean, and there's been several instances of when Pensacola's gotten snow, Tallahassee's gotten snow. In the blizzard of '93 or the superstorm of '93, I think there were like 4 inches of snow in the Panhandle. Jacksonville's had its share, some sleet, some mixed snow. And again, we're talking about the northern parts of Florida, which is still in its own right pretty impressive. But we're talking like, has it snowed at Disney World? Has it ever snowed like into Miami? And there haven't been a lot of instances of this. I mean, there's been flurries reported here and there, but there was one storm, or at least one event, going back to 1977 in January, and there was a really big area of high pressure over the Northeast, and it was sending big time cold temperatures all the way down the East Coast. And really kind of what happened was you get that northeast flow off the Atlantic, and it's warmer even down there. Granted, it's not the summertime temperatures, the warmer Atlantic, but there was enough moisture to get into the air, and it was cold enough still over land where there were snow flurries reported all the way down to West Palm Beach and even into Homestead, which is like a northern suburb of Miami. Homestead, of course, or southern, I guess, suburb of
southern
Miami.
suburb.
Homestead, of
Yeah.
course, with Andrew. But this was going back to 1977, and the citrus crop took a beating that winter too. It was a really cold winter everywhere. But yeah, this was like, I think, the only instance where there might have been like measurable snow in Orlando, and even flakes all the way down to Miami. But
Don't forget about the most recent Christmas event.
now, yeah, I was just gonna say there is a small little, yeah, you can talk about that one, Mike, 'cause that was just this past Christmas.
Yeah. I mean, it was this Arctic outbreak that, I mean, it brought temperatures well into the negative like 50s up in like the upper plains. And that just kind of came crashing down. And it's almost reminiscent of the Arctic outbreak of 2014, just not as robust and not as long. But for this event, there was a system that came through, and there was enough cold air in the upper levels. The surface wasn't nearly as cold, like we weren't below freezing, but we were in the upper 30s, near 40, around like Rockledge, basically Brevard County in Florida, which is essentially like just west of, I think, the Space Coast. Is that where Cape Canaveral is?
Yeah, it's right along
Yeah,
I-4
Cape
there
So
Canaveral.
between
it's
Yeah.
it's
Orlando
in the
and
same
Cape Canaveral.
latitude as like the Orlando, maybe a little north there. But there was a little bit of sleet that came down, just a little cold layer as the precip came down. It was just
Mm-hmm.
enough to cause it to turn into some sleet. Which again, for that area, like we said, I mean, sleet is a whole nother situation. It's not flakes; it's actual ice balls, pellets coming from the sky.
Yeah.
So
You imagine that, conversation at Cape Canaveral. Yeah, we're gonna have to scrub this launch because we have
Excuse
sleet.
me, what'd you say?
like
Sleet?
what's sleet? I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, sleet? What? It cannot be sleet. You mean hail? No,
No,
sleet.
no.
And
Although
social media had its fun that day because there was reports of snow down at the Dolphins game in Miami. Now, yeah,
Oh
now I
yeah.
guess, of course, social media caught wind of this, and even some news sources were like, "Oh my God, it's snowing in Miami." But it happened that there was a snow, I guess, carnival before the game, and they were actually making not real snow, but they weren't making snow. It was just like cotton stuff in the air and stuff. It wasn't snow, but people were taking videos, of course, say, "Oh my gosh, it's snowing at the Dolphins pregame." But
Yeah.
that was found to be, the soundings didn't support it, and yeah, it was
yeah,
chilly, but it was just the social media today just makes
I
me laugh
saw the
sometimes.
video, Brad. I mean, if you were to have no information other than just, it's snowing, it looked like flakes. I mean, there
It
was
did. No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. They look like flakes,
seems as
but
though that could be anything. I mean, anything could be flying around in the air. But I mean, everyone was bundled up.
Yeah, yeah. I believe even if you had a snow gun like they have on ski resorts,
I
you
don't think it
can't
was
get
cold
that to
enough. No, you
happen.
still need the cold air.
Yeah.
Unless it was an inside, if it was inside with the right conditions, probably. But in that air outside, no, not at
You
all.
need compressed air and temperatures like 28 or below to make snow, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, something to that effect. Yeah, I was just looking that up too. It says a wet bulb temperature of
Yeah,
27
my old
is
days at
normally needed.
Camelback, I
So
didn't make snow. I didn't work outside, but I knew how they made snow.
yeah.
Yeah,
how
they
to get
love
down
dry
to.
air and like temperatures in low 20s and low humidity. It's just it's a perfect way to make snow.
But speaking of temperatures, because again, it wasn't as cold in Florida down there, although enough to get the Dolphins fans to dress up like it's -20. um,
Mm-hmm.
but the
Mm-hmm.
coldest temperature ever recorded in the world. Can anybody take a guess without looking? I mean, I'm sure just to take a guess.
Well, I mean, we
I'll
I
unlook.
know, but pretend you didn't
for
look
our,
at the answer. If you were to
yeah.
just out of the blue, the coldest ever.
Well, I know this though.
I know,
I
but
had to say
pretend.
either the North Pole or the South Pole.
All right, we'll give the listeners a second or two to.
Listeners are thinking, okay, you have 5 more seconds, and all right, what's the answer, Mike?
Negative 128.6 degrees
How do you even
Fahrenheit.
measure it? I mean, does that mercury go far enough down for that?
I mean,
Well, they're not certainly using a thermometer you can get
No.
at your local home improvement store. That's for sure.
for those that I guess are not in the Fahrenheit category, aka the rest of the world, that follows Celsius. Once you get past, I think it's like -40 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature scale becomes very similar in Celsius. So I don't know exactly what this translates to, but it should be very similar in Celsius.
Now, Mike, now
But
that I'm looking at our rundown, of course, and we have to have a rundown just to kind of guide our show along here, but that occurred in July, didn't it?
yeah, it was a very warm in Antarctica, Vostok, Antarctica, July 21st, 1983. So, I mean, of course, that's where
That's the
else are you
heart
going
of
to get the
winter down
coldest
there, right?
temperature? Like,
The
yeah,
southern
the bottom
hemisphere.
of the earth. um,
Yeah. So for those who wanted to know, in degrees Celsius, that is uh, 89.2 below zero.
oh, it's not
So
as
yeah,
cold. Okay, I guess
no, it's not as equivalent.
interesting.
No.
Well, the equivalent occurs at what, -40, right?
Yeah, but I didn't know that all of a sudden it just
Mm,
starts to ramp back up again. I guess there's an equilibrium point once you get to that period, and then it starts
Yeah.
to trail away.
possibly. That's what the Google what am I
Conversion.
looking for?
Conversion table. Yeah.
Conversion is telling me. Yeah, I typed in 128.6 below in Fahrenheit, and it gave me 89.2
Okay.
below
Hey, I'm not
in
going to argue with that
Celsius.
assessment. We'll go with it.
Yeah, but anyway, it is interesting that it was in July. And you got to think this is in Antarctica at Vostok,
You
whatever
got to
that
think
is.
about it too. It's July, But remember, the southern hemisphere is different than the northern hemisphere. You know, you don't get the warmest temperatures in the southern hemisphere in January. It's the opposite. And that's why winter in like the southern hemisphere is, in the summer quote unquote time, while we're baking in the sun here, July 21st, southern like South America is cold, you know. And that's just the way that
In
how
Australia,
the
yeah.
yeah, their potential for snow is during the summer months, but again, their summer is backwards. However, the United States obviously is a northern hemisphere, and the coldest temperature, I'll give our listeners 5 seconds again. What is the coldest temperature and where? Just give a state. Think of a state. You don't have to think of the location.
Alabama.
Yeah, Alabama.
Come on now.
The first three letters are right.
It's an A state. It's Alaska. Again, no surprise there, right?
Right.
No surprise. Yeah.
Negative 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Prospect Creek. Not July, but January 23rd, 1971. So that's
Amazing.
crazy.
Which is typically the coldest time of the year for most places in the northern hemisphere. I mean, you get
Yeah,
into that
January is, we're in the thick
mid-January.
of it, as we're recording this, we're in the thick of it. So not surprising at all. But if you go down into the contiguous US, the lower 48 essentially, negative 70 degrees in which state? Alabama, right? No.
No, not Alabama this time.
Montana, Rogers Pass, negative 70 degrees. So not
Montana.
much more of a difference, but
Again, but you know what?
Yeah,
You
10
get below
degrees.
minus 20. Does it even matter anymore?
I think what matters at that point is just your risk of
Oh gosh. Yeah.
frostbite,
Yeah.
because also we're not factoring in here wind chill, guys.
No, really.
Wind chill makes this even worse.
Yeah, but although you may need a calm night to get these kinds of temperatures
That is
too.
true.
So
That is very true. But
True.
let's just think about it. If you had a wind chill, like maybe a 10-mile-an-hour breeze with a
yeah,
negative
even
70,
yeah, that's
you
nuts.
just, I mean, at that point, because wind chill is really what does it in terms of like, uh, getting frostbite hypothermia. It really speeds that up. But again, if you're out there with nothing at negative 70, it doesn't matter. There's no wind. You're gonna freeze in like, I don't know,
Your
5 minutes or
skin will,
less.
yeah, your tissue, skin is just
It's
instant.
gonna get cold, and you're gonna start to get frostbite quick without a wind.
Yeah, and the reason why the wind chill does that is because it takes all that heat away from your body very quickly. So that's why you get the frostbite coming in so much quicker because that wind takes that heat away from your skin. That kind of is the little thin layer of warmth you might have around your
Yeah,
body.
thankfully we're not cold blooded.
Yeah, that's for true. We would just be standing
we would we would
motionless
we would be
outside.
like the iguanas in Florida that fall out of the
Yeah,
trees.
yeah, fall out of the trees,
Yeah,
right?
they go into a stasis mode.
Ma- Imagine that if we just walked outside on a below zero night and just fall
Yeah.
over.
Did you know that
Where's Mike? Oh,
he's just
he's
out there.
lying in the parking lot. He's all right though. He's cold
Well,
blooded,
did
so
you know
we're
that
good.
iguanas are not indigenous to Florida?
Oh no, I
No, they
didn't
were
know that.
brought here back when it was colonized,
Huh.
and they just ended up
Hmm.
exploding in population. So they are
How about that?
not a local species, which makes sense. I mean, they're iguanas are more so like a Caribbean, Central South American kind of, they're more in like a jungle tropical climate. And Florida's not as tropical. I mean, it gets to it, but it's still farther north in latitude to, you know, not be as tropical. We're talking like equator.
All right.
So anyway,
Interesting.
Well, Mike, I think you researched this next part, right?
Yeah, since we're talking about temperatures, I thought it'd be fun to kind of see how cold it might have gotten in places that you wouldn't equate with being super cold. So, if we're talking about continents, which continent do you think was colder? Africa or Australia? Hmm. Again, we'll give our listeners a chance to think about that one a
It
minute.
must be a trick question if you're asking this.
It definitely is South America.
It wasn't even a
Yes.
choice. You're like playing Celebrity Jeopardy on SNL.
Keep having that liquid lunch, Mike.
Yeah. Um, so Africa or Australia, which has gotten colder in history? So it's actually Africa, and you wouldn't think of Africa as being cold. However, in northern Africa, there's a country called Morocco, and they got down to 11 below zero in 1935 in February. Now, it wasn't by much because Australia did get to 9 below zero, and that was in New South Wales in 1994. Of course, that was in June because the seasons are flipped in the
You'd think
southern.
Australia would have gotten colder too. I mean, just because how far south, I mean, even they are. I mean, they're down towards the Antarctic Circle, the southern tip of it.
Those conditions in Morocco must have been so ripe. I mean, yes, you typically get. I mean, deserts are always known for their extreme heat, but in the evening, they are great
Oh,
radiators.
their temperature range is ridiculous. Yeah.
Oh, it goes from like the 80s and 90s in Fahrenheit down to like near zero. It's crazy the extremes, and
Yeah, and while you're talking about that, I got a one on that too.
oh yeah,
You're talking about extremes like that in a desert area. So, Death Valley is has the hottest temperature on record on Earth at 134 degrees Fahrenheit, right?
yes.
So what was the coldest Death Valley has gotten?
I'm gonna say, let's see.
No looking,
Oh,
no
see, now
cheating.
this is where I don't know. So this isn't us faking it. We don't. I don't know. At least I'm not looking it up. I promise. Um, -10
Oh, you're a little too
degrees.
cold.
Okay, so it's above zero.
Yes, we are
All
above
right.
zero.
15 degrees Fahrenheit.
Ooh, right on the nose. Now you
No,
Yeah.
cheated.
I swear, I did not look this up. I
Hmm.
did not.
Yeah, but okay, so that's what it is. 15 degrees was the lowest that it's gotten in Death Valley. So you have the hottest temperature on Earth at 134 and 15. It's at the same place at oh, it's a ranch down there. Um,
The Hidden Valley Ranch, where they make the ranch.
Hidden Valley
Yeah.
Ranch. Oh man, I'm gonna look it up because it's bothering me now.
But I don't think it happened during the same. You're not going to get 134 or whatever at the same time as 15, because I imagine that happened
No,
during the
no,
summer months,
absolutely.
and it's very tough to because you're so far north in latitude. Um,
Right.
so
Yes. So Furnace
furnace.
Creek
Hey, it's in the name,
is what?
furnace.
Right.
You can
Right.
cook an egg in like a minute out there.
Yeah, sometimes I look at that and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, come on. Yeah, the hottest temperature at Furnace Creek, did you name it after the hottest temperature or something? What happened there? That
Can you
seems odd.
imagine what the body feels like under those conditions? I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, I don't want to know.
Now you start baking.
That's just crazy. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting tidbit coming back to Africa or Australia. But there's also some interesting things across the United States here, with some colder temperatures in the states. I don't know if any of you want to go through some of that, but some are pretty surprising.
Yeah, the one that really jumps out at me is that Tallahassee, that they actually got below zero. I mean, granted, it was 1899, but February of 1899, their record low was -2 for the state. That's nuts.
Maybe their thermometers weren't working.
I mean, again, they're in the
Mm,
Panhandle, but still, that's
Yeah,
impressive to get below zero down
negative
there
two.
along
Can you
I-10
imagine today if we got to -2?
in
And
Tallahassee. Oh,
people
it would
would
be,
freak out.
yeah, they would.
oh my goodness. And I thought it was surprising too, that even places like Hawaii have gotten very cold. Hawaii has gotten down to 12 degrees. Now, of course, this is at Mauna Kea Observatory, and that's over 13,000 feet.
Well, it snows. Yeah, I mean, it snows on the higher ups of of Hawaii too. But again, like you said, I mean, we're talking 10, 12, 13,000 feet up. And the date on that, Mike, that one really kind of surprised me, or Mike's. May 17th. I mean, that's
Right. Yeah, that is quite interesting. That it is that date in May, because we're still talking about northern
yeah.
hemisphere, correct?
I mean, by May, even the higher ups of Hawaii, you're thinking it's got to be getting into the 70s by then. Pretty.
It must have been a very,
Yeah, it
very
had to be
cold,
something really
anomalous air mass that
anomalous.
just moved
Yeah.
over at those elevations. But yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Thankfully, though, even if it snows up there, I don't think they need any snow plows because I mean, I don't know if you can drive up there.
There's one road up there, and that's it. Yeah.
Maybe one, but if it's snowing, you're not going to drive up there. So,
Yeah, I think we can pass on that
oh,
one.
we got another thing here. Another guess who's been colder?
Ooh, fun.
Illinois or Pennsylvania? Do
I would
do
think
do
Illinois.
do do
I mean,
do
honestly.
Yeah. Pennsylvania's got some
do
cold
do do
pockets,
do
though. I
do
mean,
do do.
Bradford, PA, all those places.
The answer is Pennsylvania. Negative
Wow.
42.
That's
Yeah, you do think of the Midwest a lot of times as colder. Yeah.
No, but it's
Right. That's what I
surprising
mean.
to
It's
me,
yeah. You would think the Midwest sometimes is colder than the Northeast.
because the Midwest, the upper Midwest, and all that, they
Yeah.
get
Well,
so cold with high pressures diving straight out of
It
Canada.
usually moderates by the time it gets here a
now,
little bit.
do we know where this negative 42 degrees was recorded? Because my guess is maybe it was
Mm,
higher up in elevation and it was a cold air mass that came through. And I know that the Midwest gets cold, but a lot of that, there's really no elevation in Illinois. So
No.
you're at like a little bit above sea level. Meanwhile, there's places that go up maybe 3,000, 4,000 feet. Pennsylvania,
Now I'm not looking, and we don't have this on the rundown. For some reason, Smethport sticks in my mind. I'm gonna look
Smethport,
that up. Yeah, for some reason I've heard this before.
Smethport. Interesting.
all right, you do some research on that one, but I say that the Pennsylvania gauge was broken.
Okay.
I don't know.
Maybe
I
the
just
person was reading it backwards and it was actually 24 instead of 42.
24. I would believe
Yeah.
that. Sure, that would seem more in
I
line.
see a minus 39 for Smethport, so I don't know where the minus 42 is reported.
Okay. But still, that still
Wow.
beats it.
Oh yeah.
Illinois was negative
Yeah, that's
36. Negative
still
39 is still,
that's
yeah,
impressive.
it's crazy. What's more impressive is how cold Miami got
Oh yeah.
for Christmas.
Just talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, 50 degrees
And
back in.
that's what's called a low high.
Yeah, it's not. I
Yeah,
mean, granted, by our
record
standards
cold
here,
high.
for like if New York City was 50 degrees Christmas Day, that's like all right, light jacket. Down there, 50 degrees is heavy coat.
Right.
Well, absolutely. I mean, down in Miami, you're just not prepared for anything below, I would say, 65.
Can you imagine telling someone there the high on Christmas Day is gonna be 51 or 50 degrees in Miami?
Oh, they'd be freaking out. Get the
Mm,
space heaters out. But your body, it's almost like the same idea in like Denver, Colorado. Your body's acclimated to pressure. Your body down there is acclimated to temperatures above 70 degrees for most of the year. So once you start to go into these colder, I mean, people laugh like, "Oh, 50 degrees." But really, if your body's out there, you're acclimated. And once you get acclimated, a 50-degree day will feel colder to you versus someone that's come from a climate where 50 degrees in the winter is a warm day, you know? So everybody's different and everybody acclimates differently. And they change with the weather. But yeah, down there, it was probably bad.
Well, while we're on the subject too, the coldest temperature ever recorded in Miami. Any quick guesses?
mm,
Obviously, this would be an overnight
32.
low.
48 degrees now.
No. The coldest ever was 28 degrees on
Oh my
February
God.
6th,
Shut
1947.
down the city. Shut
Yeah,
down everything.
that's
28
the
degrees.
official
But
low.
like,
Yeah, official record low.
how did they keep the pipes from freezing? They must have wrapped like pipes and stuff, you know? because they don't have that
Well,
infrastructure.
even still, I mean, you gotta imagine the ground temperature must be
Yeah,
still
I mean,
pretty
even if they get a
warm,
couple nights
Yeah,
of cold, yeah.
right?
probably, but anything exposed, that's not good.
I mean, I don't know what type of insulation they use, if they still
Well,
insulate the pipes like they do up north and that sort of thing.
this was also back in 1947, so I mean, obviously, we're not talking about
Oh, that's
current
true.
infrastructure.
Here's a fun fact about the Southeast. Now, you guys know I lived in Charleston for about 17 years, South Carolina, and there's no basements down there because the water table is just too high. So everything's on slabs. Our water heater was actually in the garage. And we do get cold temperatures. There were nights that, I mean, you do get cold down in the southeast sometimes. We had some temperatures in the low 20s, and our pipes would actually freeze because it's exposed in the garage, and the pipes aren't actually insulated until they get inside. So we'd have trouble with the water coming in from the hot water heater outside, which was again exposed, and that would freeze the pipes because once it got cold enough on those, pipes, it would just travel through the house. It was crazy.
Yeah, that'll do it for sure. Um, it's just one more last thing about Miami. I wonder what like hoodie weather is down in Miami. Like when do they bust out a hoodie, or do they even have hoodies?
Probably when the temperature gets below 65.
You think 65? I bet you it's more like 70.
No, come
Now,
on.
I bet they think 70 is cool.
No, no, come on. 70 is a normal low for them. That's
yeah.
that's normal. I would think once you get into the lower 60s, like at that point, because I mean, when you break 60, you get into the upper 50s, that's when you bring out the coat. So
Yeah.
like the 60s have to be hoodie weather.
You know what? I should ask a good friend of mine. He lives down in South Florida
Yeah.
around
Ask
Miami. I
ask
should.
but ask the people that have been there forever, not the people that have come from like New York.
Right.
Because
I mean, he's a
Yeah, I was gonna say.
transplant from
yeah,
Pennsylvania,
so
so it's like,
I mean, if he's been there for a long time, he might have acclimated. But if Um, if you've lived in Florida all your life and you're down there, I mean, ask that person. They probably will be like, "Yeah, I wear a coat when it's 60." Like, uh, you wear the mittens and
hmm.
scarf, long pants, socks, thick socks, everything.
So here's another one, real quick. Who's been colder, Chicago or Denver? Who do you think's been colder?
Oh, this seems easy. This seems like a no-brainer, right?
Right. So I mean, if you're thinking about it, most people will probably say, well, Denver absolutely has been colder. But it's not by much, really. Denver has been 29 below zero. But Chicago's lowest has been
Hmm,
27 below
pretty
zero.
comparable.
So it's really, yeah, it's really not that different. You thought like Denver would be a shoe-in colder, but it's actually not.
Yeah,
What about the coldest New York City? What's the record there?
That would be 15 below.
that's cold.
Yeah, I mean, it's
And
certainly
especially with the
cold.
urban heat. Well, then again, we're going back to 1934. See, I think it'd be tough to get that cold anymore. You know, not even
Nah,
talking
you'd
about
be
climate
surprised. I
change and
think
Well,
things
we
like that.
could.
I think just because of the
I think we could. I mean, hey, we've gotten we've well yeah the problem yeah you're right urbanization like in New York City itself. I would say Central Park still has a chance,
yeah, maybe
like if you were to
well, that's
measure.
where this was taken, Central Park.
Yeah, so like I mean, but then again, back then Central Park was a little more,
open,
there's not a lot of things
right?
around it, it was not as urbanized, but now it's more urbanized. It's kind of the only spot that's not in Central Park. But I think you could still get below 0 in New York. Maybe not -15, but maybe like -1 or -2. I think it's still possible. But yeah, you're right. If you're downtown Manhattan, the lower half, it you can't get. It's just so much around it. So, what about Los Angeles? Can they get below freezing at all?
Can Los Angeles get below freezing?
Yeah, you know. I mean,
I mean,
Miami.
that would be pretty rare. I mean,
Yeah,
they're usually pretty stable out there on the West Coast.
yeah. Well,
Their weather's usually pretty mundane unless you're getting one of these,
Yeah.
atmospheric river type
And that
things.
would still bring in the milder air, though. You would have to have a weird setup where the high is like north of them and flowing the cold air down the Sacramento Valley or something.
well, in 1949, they fell to 27 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's close to Miami.
January 4th. Yeah, I mean, That's insane. Los Angeles recently, I don't know if it was last year or the year before that, maybe it was 3 years ago, I forgot, but they had some snow. Actually, was it snow or was it
Might have
hail?
been
It was
hail
a
or sleet.
sleet.
Yeah.
It was a very weird mixture of some sort of wintry precipitation that fell from the sky. In like I don't know if it was Pasadena. I think it was Pasadena, right? It was somewhere inland. It wasn't on the coast. It was inland Los Angeles, not in the mountains, but kind of like more inland that they had that. So it gets cold out there. But 27 degrees. Oof.
All right, let's do one last factoid on temperature, and then we'll move on to our last thing about the pressures and things like that. But now we got the Super Bowl actually coming up, and when you think about Super Bowl, you think about nice weather, Arizona, Southern California. But a long time
Hmm.
ago, back in the 60s and 70s, right when the Super Bowls were actually starting, they actually did still play it outside a lot. And again, they still play it outside now, but they usually again go to where they pretty sure it's gonna be warm. But they played it at in New Orleans. Now, granted, in New Orleans, February, you're thinking, yeah, it'll be okay warm. I guess this is actually January. Super Bowl six on January 16th is actually the coldest Super Bowl ever, and it was outdoors. Super Bowl. I don't think the Superdome was built yet. It was at Tulane Stadium at 39 degrees. So that is the record coldest Super Bowl. Which again, when you think about it, it's not that cold, but you're looking at nice weather and
So this threw me for a loop a little bit, Brad. You're talking about Super Bowl, but actually before the Super Bowl, there was something called the NFL Championship that they would play. So that's why I was thinking, like, well, wait a minute. What about the Ice Bowl that you always hear about that was in Green Bay and, you know, but that was the,
NFL championship game, right? I think they actually went to the home field of the or the best record of the home team.
yeah. So that was back in 1967 before they started calling it the Super Bowl. And, but that was 13 below zero during that game.
Wow.
And I honestly, I have no idea how you play football at that type of temperature. When I mean, I didn't play football long. I mean, just through high school and that kind of stuff. But there was a few cold games out there that were maybe been 40 degrees, and my goodness, so 40 degrees and raining.
Yeah,
It was
miserable. Now,
awful.
now here's a funny, not funny to this guy though, but I mean, here's an odd tidbit with this game. Now, back then, referees used to use metal whistles, and this actually changed. This is the reason why they don't use metal whistles anymore, because it was so cold that one of the referees, his name was Norm Schachter, and he put the whistle up to. Well, no, think about a Christmas Story when the kid put his warm tongue on the cold pole.
Yeah.
Same idea here. I guess when he went to go use his whistle, it it stuck to his lips, and then he ripped it off quick, and it tore a piece of his lip off. And the
Oh,
player, one of the players for the Cowboys, said he bled most of the game because it tore off a piece of his lip. So
oh
from that
my
point on, after that
goodness.
game, they started using plastic whistles, and that's why. I guess to this day, that's why they use plastic whistles. Yeah, and actually, the announcer back then was Frank Gifford. I mean, he's old school. He used to play, but I guess he laughed and made a joke during the game. He's like, "I'll take another bite of my coffee if you don't mind."
Bite. Oh my
It was so
God.
cold, I guess, when they were announcing it. But
That's funny. I like that. Bite of
yeah,
my
yeah.
coffee. Yeah. You got a coffee popsicle going on there.
All right, so let's go into our last section here, a little bit of a rapid fire question, or I guess answer here about the different types of pressures and winter storms. And when we think of pressure, we think of
Hurricanes, yeah.
hurricanes, in the tropical seasons, category 5 storm can get down to like sub 940 millibars of pressure. But in January 1913, there was an extra tropical cyclone. We'll stick with the tropical first. Because the tropical season typically ends in November, but it can go into January. We've seen that the past couple of years with storms going through the new year. They can happen. This one actually got down to 955 millibars.
And that's just like, yeah, that's like your nor'easter off the coast.
Exactly. But it did have some tropical characteristics. So it's not totally, hurricane, but it's tropical cyclone at this point. Um, Inland, though, if we go back to, inland across the northern plains. October 2010, 955.2 millibars from storm over Minnesota.
Yeah, I actually remember that one. I know I just started. Well, I did just start. I started in 2008 at WeatherWorks, but this was 2 years in. But I remember seeing that storm developing on the models and just thinking, my goodness, like I don't know if that's got to be some sort of record. I mean, and yeah, obviously it was 955 is just amazing. I mean, I don't know what category hurricane that would be comparable to if we went by pressure, but it would probably be something
Like a
like
cat 3 or 4.
3.
Yeah, or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the blizzard of 90 of 78 was 956. So very comparable. I mean, I can imagine that storm in October was a blizzard. I mean, you got to have winds whipping out of that. The pressure gradient must have been insane.
Oh, absolutely. And you think about, you compare those storms, and one of the benchmarks for East Coast nor'easters is the superstorm of 93. And both of those storms were a lower pressure than the superstorm of 93, which was 960 at its lowest point. That was over New England. Um, and you know, living through that as a kid was just amazing, and we've talked about that in prior podcasts before. Um, but I would say before that happened, now I don't know where to put this one because Sandy did have snow.
Yes, West Virginia.
um, so this one's kind of a controversy though, because it was a tropical system and it made an extratropical conversion as it made landfall in New Jersey. So some people say it wasn't a hurricane when it made landfall.
Yeah, let's just say that it's a hybrid of some sort.
Some
Um,
sort of hybrid, because there was, like, over 2 feet of snow in portions of West Virginia, with this system, and that had a pressure of 946 millibars when it went into Brigantine, New Jersey.
Now, I want to bring back just a little bit of a backtrack to the Boxing Day blizzard of 2010. That actually got to 960 millibars. So that was right
Oh,
at
did
the
it?
superstorm. Yeah, I looked it up. Apparently, at its peak pressure was 960. But I think that was when it was starting to pull away from the coast. Because again, once you get farther north, the pressure gradient, like I mean, storms that get up into the northern Atlantic can really drop.
Oh,
At
absolutely.
that point, they're all fish storms, but still, I mean, you go the farther north you go in the hemisphere, the stronger the pressure gradient, the stronger the pressure drop is going to be. But I just wanted to bring that up, that it was a little similar to the Superstorm 93.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk a little bit about what the lowest pressures were and some of the strongest nor'easters. But just to compare, we're talking about 960, 950, but the lowest pressure ever recorded was 870.
That's on Earth, right? That's on the whole.
Yeah, 870 millibars, and that was in Typhoon Tip in 1979 out in the Pacific. So while these storms did get very low pressures and certainly powerful, nothing's going to beat a hurricane at that point. I mean, they just can get so low.
Wilma got close back in um, 2005. It got down to 882 millibars. So
Every time somebody says, like, "Oh, you were close" or something, I think of that commercial where that guy's like dangling a dollar, and, "Ooh, you gotta be quicker than that."
gotta be quicker than that.
You
Oh
know?
man. But on the flip side of low pressure, we have high pressure, and we think of like a 1040 millibar high as pretty solid. But the world record for the highest ever reported pressure was in Russia, 1083 millibars of pressure in Agata, Russia, in December of
Yeah, wow.
1968. Yeah, that that's insane. I mean,
Get a headache from that kind of pressure on you.
were there any clouds? It was probably a nice, bright, and sunny day. I mean, so dry. Can't
Yeah, right
imagine.
over Siberia, I would imagine. That's
Sure, it was a little
amazing.
chilly under that too.
Yeah, just a little
A
bit,
little
right?
tad, negative a mild negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit.
Um, just for comparison's sake, though, back in December of 2022, just not too long ago, when we had the big Arctic outbreak come across the northern plains, that high pressure that dropped in out of Canada was around 1060 millibars, I believe. So you're talking about another 23 millibars higher, which is pretty amazing to me because I thought I saw the 1060 high and I was like, oh my goodness. But and with low pressures and high pressures, you get lots of wind between that gradient. Um, so it's interesting. What is the highest wind gusts? I mean, it's not totally, maybe winter related, but I mean, it happened in winter, at least as far as the United States is concerned. Well, sort of in winter. We're coming out of winter, I should say. But the maximum wind gust was 231 miles an hour. Now, this is measured by an instrument too, so obviously we can get potentially we can get a little bit higher than that inside a tornado or an F5 or EF5. But this was on Mount Washington, measured by an instrument in April 1934, 231 miles an hour.
That's impressive for the East Coast too.
I mean, they always gust, really high. I know they were going over 130 miles an hour in one of the storms in last December.
And relatively speaking, it's not really. Yeah, they're high. It's not the highest point east of the Mississippi, but it's close to. But relatively, it's only like 6,200 feet, right? And the Rockies, you get
Yeah,
places
something
that are
like that.
11,
Yeah.
12,000 feet. So it's pretty impressive to get that kind of wind.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right, but it seems like that is one of the windiest places, that's for sure, in
Now,
the U.S.
look, we have problems of our own with METARs, stations that report, temperature and pressure and wind of getting anything above like 140 mile per hour gusts. Once you get into the 200 mile per hour range, you have to have some serious equipment to survive those sustained or even, you know, brief wind gusts, over 200. So it, it's going to take a lot to like, there could have been a higher gust in reality. Yes. Would we have been able to measure it? Probably not, because this would have
Yeah,
happened.
always seems to
These
fail.
gusts didn't happen, 200 years ago. We measured these within the past century. So technology was not around. We didn't have the equipment. We could have had a gust over 300 somewhere. Not saying it happened, but I'm saying it's tough to measure wind gusts above a certain threshold.
Yeah, and you're right, Mike. Typically, when you have landfalling hurricanes and things like that, the instruments just don't survive. They usually break at a certain point. Once you get over 100 miles an hour, typically they just start breaking down on us, which is surprising that this wind speed in Australia, the highest wind speed measured on Earth was 253 miles an hour, and that was in a tropical cyclone in Australia. I can't believe it survived, honestly, to measure that speed and that it's actually validated, but um, pretty amazing there. The other thing I find interesting is that I recently bought an anemometer for my house. It's always windy at my house. I'm on top of a hill. And this thing says it's rated to 111 miles an hour. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm mounting this on my shed and I'm thinking, there is no way that this piece of instrument, it's basically plastic, you know, how is this going to hold up to over 100 miles? I mean, you're talking about category 3 hurricane. You're telling me this thing is going to withstand?
They probably put it into what they did was, I'm guessing, is they had it in a wind tunnel, and they probably had they might have tested it once. I can imagine they had multiple times they tried testing this out, and it
Mm,
failed, but they had like one or
it
two
must have.
like barely made it. So they're like, oh, it can survive 111, but it's like, but out of like how many attempts will it survive? Like 50 attempts and like one time it survived. Like that doesn't count as they
Hmm.
even survived to 111.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know. I'm very skeptical
it's
here.
theoretical. It's theoretical 111, but realistically 90.
Yeah. So next time it gusts at my house, I mean, usually I get really good gusts. I want to see how it handles like 40 plus. I will be surprised if it. uh, I mean, it should hold on. I would imagine it seems like it should hold on, but I don't know. I'm skeptical to see if this thing holds up and if it breaks or not.
By the way, one last thing I have to mention because I said that Hurricane Wilma got close, but actually Patricia got very close.
Oh, Eastern Pacific.
872 millibars back in 2014, I think. Um, yeah, it was 2015. Sorry, in October. Yeah, so they got 2 millibars close to tip. So just wanted to throw that out there. Wilma was third place. So
I believe there was some tweets from the hurricane hunters saying that that was one of the worst rides through a hurricane they've experienced. I think there's a video out there showing like showing the pilot getting like lifted up off the seat based off the turbulence and how much they dropped. I think they dropped like over 1,000 feet or something like that almost instantly when they were going through the eye wall. And if they weren't buckled in, they'd be, smashing against the ceiling. but
but hey, we got to plug in that the Hurricane Hunter episode now that we're talking about hurricane hunters.
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we talked to a hurricane hunter.
Was that Ryan, right?
Ryan Rickert, yes. Back in the fall. So please check that episode out. It was a good one. I think it's actually a two-part episode with Ryan, and that was really interesting getting his perspective on what it's like flying through hurricanes. But Mike, since you're a guest on the show, why don't you just end this off with our last little factoid about earliest measurable snowfall?
All right, in New York City, the earliest measurable snow was back in October of 1876, the 15th. Half inch of snow, and I assume this is Central Park because that's where most of, if not all, the measurements are taken. The latest was January 29th, 1973.
So yeah, that's the latest first measurable snow. So
Measurable snow, yes. So they haven't gotten any snow before January 29th, 1973 of that season. That was the first day they had snow. So that's that's insane, but not as crazy as Chicago because Chicago saw the latest measurable snow in December 28th, 2021. So they haven't they've at least snowed through January, essentially, but the latest was December 28th, which is kind of insane. The earliest was October 12th, which is not much of a difference from New York City.
for Chicago, I think it's impressive that they can hold on to December
Yeah,
28th without a
that's pretty.
measurable snowfall, because they usually see snowfall a lot sooner than we do on the East Coast, especially when you get to New York City. So making it all the way, almost all the way through December is actually, um, quite impressive. And just so everybody knows, when we're talking about measurable snowfall, we're talking about anything that is zero point 0.1 inch or higher.
Trace don't count.
We're not, yeah, flakes in the air, that does not count. um, and just for reference, actually, during that year where they had the latest first measurable snow in New York City, they also had the least amount of snow in Central Park at 2.8 inches for the year, 72 to 73, 1972, 1973. So there's a few New York factoids, but I think we covered about every record that we could think of here for the winter, guys.
Yeah, I'm sure there's more, but I think we're already extending the amount of time we've been talking. So I think we should probably, and I'm saying this from a producing side, um, we need to probably end this.
Yeah, let's wrap. So hey, that's our episode for this week on the Weather Lounge. Thanks to meteorologist Mike Priante for coming out and being a special guest with us again this episode. And thanks to Brad too, but he's always here.
Yeah,
Uh,
thanks.
but that's the show for this week. Remember, we'll have a new one every 2 weeks, so come back and visit the Weather Lounge and also rate our podcast. That pushes us up a bit higher into the ratings. And also visit weatherworksinc.com for our company and what we do there. And also visit WeatherWorks on all our other social media accounts too. So that's it for this episode. We'll be back soon.